Can y'all please do me a favor? Could you please send this video out to all of the designer fragrance houses? Just send it out. Just do it. They need to see this. Okay? They need to see it. What's up, YouTube? It's your boy Darian, man. I'm the Bowtie Fragrance Guy. I talk about fragrance on this channel. I talk about fashion, lifestyle, all that good stuff. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, I hope you consider subscribing to this channel. And make sure you hit the bell icon as well to ensure you get notified when I upload new content on the channel. So guys, I'm going to be talking about, in my opinion, from my collection, 10 of my favorite designer fragrances of all time. That's as it stands today. Now, this is one of those things that sometimes changes periodically, but for the most part, a lot of these fragrances have been A1 since day one in my collection. What brought on this video idea was, you guys know it's not a secret that how disappointed to some extent I have been with a lot of the designer fragrances that have been released really over the last 2 years. It's been flanker after flanker after flanker after flanker after flanker. You get the point. It's been nothing but flankers, and I've been really yearning for something different and something creative. Because of the lack of creativity of a lot of the fragrances that have been released in the designer realm of things over the last couple of years, I bought some of the newer stuff, but nothing has really excited me or blew my socks off like a lot of these fragrances used to do back in what I would say or consider back in the day when I first really got into collecting fragrances heavy. We don't see those fragrances anymore. So a lot of my favorite stuff came out around the 2012 and on era in the designer realm of fragrances. So I just wanted to go back and enjoy some of these fragrances and talk to you guys about 10 of my top designer fragrances of all time. So if you want to see what's on the list, you know the routine. Keep it locked right here. Let's get it.
The Bowtie Fragrance Guy.
All right, guys, we're back. Thank you so much for keeping it locked in. We're going to go ahead and jump right into the video. Before I do that, I would love it if you guys would join me down in the comment section. I would love to see, out of my 10 favorites, how many of these do you guys actually have in your collection? I think that's interesting because I think, of course, one of the primary reasons that people follow fragrance influencers is because we seem, or you would probably seem to have similar tastes to mine. So I would love to see down in the comments section how many of these fragrances that I have on my list do you have in your collection. I'd love for you to let me know down in the comment section. All right, so the first fragrance that would be in my top 10 would be this fragrance. It actually is one of my top fall designer fragrances for this year. It's from the house of Paco Rabanne, and it's this one, 1 Million Prive. 1 Million Prive. This fragrance was love at first sniff for me. To put it simple and plain, this fragrance smells very similar to apple pie. That apple pie vibe that a lot of folks talk about that you find in Wajan, apple brandy from By Killian to some extent, angel share to some extent. You get that in this fragrance. The best in the designer realm to me that kind of fits into that category. You have some myrrh in this fragrance. You have some tonka bean. You have this hookah tobacco accord in the heart as well. And it's just a very, very, very delicious fragrance. If you love gourmands, this is one of the best kind of gourmand designer fragrances in my humble opinion. Now, sadly, for what reason I don't know, this fragrance has been discontinued with Paco Rabanne, but man, listen, this is one that while you still can, guys, I highly recommend you get your nose on this fragrance. From the house of Paco Rabanne, this is called 1 Million Prive. So I don't want to sound like a broken record on this video, but most of the fragrances that I smell on this list have been love at first sniff. This one is the only one that was I was a little bit on the fence about at first, but my goodness, I love this fragrance. Now, it was more about the concentration, which I'll explain in a moment. From the house of Tom Ford, this is called Black Orchid. Black Orchid, very unique fragrance. DNA. This fragrance to me is really about the melange of floral notes that you're gonna get in this fragrance, primarily the ylang ylang, which kind of gives this fruity nuance that kind of resembles banana. And I definitely picked that up in this fragrance. I was always trying to figure out what that was when I first smelled this fragrance, and that's what it was. It's the ylang ylang, because you get a lot of that in this fragrance. Of course, you get the dark truffle in the opening that gives a very gourmand feel to the scent. So you got the florals, you got the truffle, and then when it dries down, you got that kind of sweet vanillic base, some sandalwood. This is an amazing fragrance, very, very unique. And like I said, you don't get a lot of unique stuff nowadays in the designer realm of things. But when this fragrance was released, I think it was around 2015, if I'm not mistaken, you know, it was definitely a winner. Very unisex. A lot of women wear this fragrance, but a lot of guys wear this fragrance as well. I think it can go for either gender. And what I was referring to earlier was the concentration. And when I first got it, I smelled the eau de parfum, which is a little too strong for me. Now I'm pretty sure I probably welcome that because I love this fragrance so much. So I went with the eau de toilette, and at the time it was right up my alley. But again, one that I love, one of my favorites of all time in the designer realm, from the house of Tom Ford. This is Black Orchid, the eau de toilette. All right, 2 fragrances for me to get a quick honorable mention. You guys know what this fragrance is and what it does. From the house of Christian Dior, Dior Sauvage. And I think the eau de parfum is probably my favorite. I love the elixir, love the parfum, the EDT as well, but this is probably my favorite. Just put it as an honorable mention because it is so popular of a fragrance. It would be kind of typical, but it definitely gets an honorable mention. You cannot deny what this fragrance was to the fragrance industry and how good it smells. And then this one, Azzaro Wanted by Night. One of the best performing designer fragrances in my entire collection. You got that apple cinnamon thing going on here too. That's something that I love in fragrances. And like I said, this thing performs all day long. So these were 2 fragrances I want to mention really quick as honorable mentions. Now the next fragrance on the list is one that actually made my fall designer fragrance list as well this year. From the house of Mugler, Pure Havane. Pure Havane, I got about 55% left in this bottle. I do have a backup bottle. One I will always have in my collection. One of my first real true loves from the designer fragrance side of things, man. I love this stuff, the tobacco here and the honey in this fragrance, and the patchouli is just an amazing combination. Gives this kind of cherry type vibe to this fragrance. You know, it used to drive me crazy when I would talk about this fragrance. People were like, there's no cherry. Didn't say it was cherry, there's a vibe. Whatever the notes are here, it kind of gives off that vibe with cherry, like a smoked kind of cherry tobacco thing going on in this fragrance. And this stuff is just absolutely phenomenal, man. I always say this when I talk about this fragrance as well. It reminds me of the good old days of the fragrance community, for me personally. But anyway, one that I love, one of my top designer fragrances of all time, will always have it in my collection. From the house of Mugler, this is Pure Havane. All right, guys, the next fragrance that is one of my favorites of all time. This fragrance comes from the house of Chanel. Kind of hard to have your favorite of all time without having something from Chanel, in my opinion. And this is Bleu Chanel Parfum. Bleu Chanel Parfum. All of these fragrances are designer fragrances I'm always going to have in my collection. Oh my gosh, this is so good, man. Compared to the original, again, I always say this, they turned the citruses down, amped up the woods, cedar wood, the sandalwood, and the amber wood. They amped up those notes in this fragrance. Of course, combine that with that nice tonka bean dry down. Amazing scent. Now, you still get the zesty citrus opening that you get from the original, but again, it's not as long lasting in this particular scent as, you know, again, and prominent as the woodier accords and notes are in the Parfum. It took the DNA and made it a little bit more mature. That always works for me. So one I always have in my collection, one of my top designer fragrances of all time, has to be this one from the house of Chanel. This is Bleu Chanel Parfum. All right, and of course, you guys, if you've been following me for any amount of time, you knew this fragrance was going to be on the list. This one comes from the house of Tom Ford, and this is called Noir Extreme. Noir Extreme, man. If I had to really say and pinpoint my favorite designer fragrance, I can't say definitively, but this definitely would be in the top 3. This definitely be in the top 3, although I don't have these in order. This would definitely be in the top 3. I love this stuff. Of course, the very infamous coffee note, the Indian dessert gives this almost ice cream kind of feel, vanillic feel to the fragrance, but it opens up with the spices. You have some cardamom, nutmeg, a little bit of saffron, give this almost leathery feel to the fragrance, and it just works really well with the spices in the opening of the scent. And then of course it dries down, of course, to the coffee and some of the more sweeter, more gourmand elements of this fragrance. Just again, one of my favorites of all time. If you love gourmands, this is one you gotta put your nose on from the house of Tom Ford. One of my favorites. This is called Noir Extreme. The next fragrance that will be in my top 10 designer fragrances of all time, this one comes from the house of Christian Dior, and this is Dior Homme Sport. Dior Homme Sport, this is from 2012. They did some crazy stuff with this fragrance, man. They took notes in, put them back out, that kind of stuff, in and out with notes, primarily the iris. I don't remember the exact year this was released originally, I think 2008. And I know in 2012, the version that I have, they put the iris back in. And what I found that really makes this fragrance so unique and one of my favorites is the ginger, citrusy ginger combination in the opening that gives it the sport label. Man, when you give that zesty ginger in here and you combine that with the iris, it just does something that is really unmatched by a lot of other fragrances. The 2017 version of this, and I think there may be even another one after that, they're pretty good, but they do not hold a candle to the 2012 version of Dior Homme Sport. So if you can find this one, man, make sure you get your nose on this. One of my favorite designer fragrances of all time. This stuff is really good. From the house of Christian Dior, this is Dior Homme Sport. All right, guys, you knew this fragrance had to be on the list from the house of Giorgio Armani. This is Acqua di Gio Profumo. Acqua di Gio Profumo. I really enjoyed the original Acqua di Gio, which was released in 1996. I think everybody has or has had a bottle of that fragrance. I just think they made that DNA even better when they put incense and patchouli in the Profumo version. Made it even more versatile, even more of a wearable fragrance year-round by adding those 2 notes to an already amazing scent DNA. And not to mention the fact that now the Profumo version lasts longer, especially some of those newer batches of Acqua di Gio. Over the course of time, they've gotten worse and worse on performance. But that's another video for another time. One of my best top designer fragrances of all time definitely is going to be this one right here. It is so versatile, so easy to wear, and it smells amazing. The recipe for a fragrance that you want to keep around in your collection. So definitely one of my favorites. This is Acqua di Gio Profumo. All right, now the next fragrance on my list, another one that goes back to those really good times in the fragrance community, reminds me of my earlier days of collecting fragrances. Still, in my opinion, probably the best date night designer fragrance on the planet from the house of Dolce & Gabbana. This is the One Eau de Parfum. The One Eau de Parfum. I always say this, people talk about performance and all these kind of things, but with it being a date night fragrance, most dates don't last past 4 hours. Anyway, so it will suffice for what it was, in my opinion, created and best utilized for. Very simple, man. Nice ambery base with some tobacco and orange blossom. This stuff is just, it's unmatched when you just smell it. One of the best smelling fragrances in my whole designer fragrance collection. And again, it works really well for date nights, close encounter type situations. I don't really care that it's not the best performer. It works and it smells amazing. So definitely one of my favorites of all time. It may be one of yours too, from the house of Dolce & Gabbana. This is called the One Eau de Parfum. All right, guys, now this next fragrance, I have 2 more left. This one comes from the house of Prada, and this is called Prada Luna Rossa Black. Prada Luna Rossa Black, and this particular scent, man, there's so many good ones from the Prada Luna Rossa line. I could have went with Carbon. I love Prada Luna Rossa Sport. I think it's highly underrated, but I just keep coming back to this one. Some of the main notes you're gonna get on this one, it starts to dry down. You get this kind of sweet combination of patchouli and coumarin and amber in the scent. And again, it is one of the best smelling designer fragrances in my entire collection. I love this stuff. It's a staple of mine in the fall and winter seasons, and one that I'm always gonna keep around. Of course, again, one of my favorites in my entire collection from the house of Prada. This is called Prada Luna Rossa Black. All right, guys, and last but not least on this list, this fragrance came out, I think, around 2016, 17 maybe, from the replica line from Maison Margiela. This is called By the Fireplace. By the Fireplace, and of course you guys have heard so many times it smells just like roasted chestnuts. It's really, really warm. It's kind of smoky, and then of course you have that nutty nuance that comes in from the chestnuts. But man, this is just an amazing fragrance. Very, very creative. I think this is one of those fragrances that you will find is probably one of the top favorites for a lot of people in the designer realm of things. Again, when you compare a fragrance like this to the type of stuff that's coming out nowadays, it just really leaves you yearning for things to go back to being creative, just like this fragrance was when we received this one. One of my favorites, man. I go back and forth sometimes between this and Jazz Club. Right now, this is the one that I will give the nod to. So if you haven't tried this one, make sure you get it in your life from the house of Maison Margiela. The replica line, this one is called By the Fireplace. But that's it, guys. That's my time. I hope you enjoyed this list today as I gave you my top 10 designer fragrances of all time. As always, I sincerely appreciate your time and your attention to these videos. You guys don't have to watch, but you do. And I sincerely appreciate that. Now, don't forget to take a few moments to go ahead and like, comment, and subscribe. And make sure you are sharing these videos out to some other folks that you think could use this information or find it entertaining. Because I'm your guy, Darian. I'm the Bowtie Fragrance Guy. I love to look good, and of course, I love to smell amazing. So until next time, guys, keep looking good, keep smelling even better. I'll catch you on the flip side. Peace.